Joining us today is James Gorrie, political economist and author of the book, The China Crisis. James, thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure.
So, I think we want to talk a lot about the nuts and bolts of China's economy and how that affects the global economy. But so any discussion about China's economy, it always comes down to, someone will say, well, China isn't actually communist. It's capitalism, really, or state capitalism, or some other thing like that. So, you're the expert. What are your thoughts?
Well, the problem with kind of nomenclature, what what did Shakespeare say? A rose by another name is still a rose. State capitalism is a friendlier term than communism. But when you look at communism from a economic standpoint, it's the state owns everything, all the means of production, and there's usually a necessity for political oppression, social control, and all the security apparatus that goes along with that. So, anyway, after Mao Zedong, Deng Xiaoping, there was tremendous amounts of control, but there was also tremendous amounts of poverty and hunger. And communism, by definition, when the state owns everything, you look into economic matrices that don't work because you're controlling output without recognizing demand or different valuations of commodities or services within society. So it's very arbitrary, and because it's very arbitrary, it's not very flexible. And flexibility is in an economy is key for adjusting to different conditions, market prices, market conditions, all those kinds of things. So, yeah, now it's state capitalism, which was introduced in the 80s, really, when they realized, the Communist Party in China realized that they either start producing an economy that they promised, or there's going to be mass revolts, which there happened. So the economic terms, state capitalism, or China's not communist, they're certainly politically communist. They're certainly socially communist. They have the most advanced surveillance and political oppression apparatus probably since the Nazis, or maybe even the Stasi in Germany. Probably better, actually, much better in terms of technology. So the economy has been state capitalism. Now it's reverting back to mass state control. So they got wealthy. They had a strategy of allowing and encouraging, the West, whether it's the U.S., and Europe, and Japan, from a market economy standpoint and technological development standpoint. Yeah, come on in, show us how to do it, build our factories, give us the IP, and then we're going to let people loose. And that's the kind of the contract they come up with after Tiananmen Square, right? Don't talk politics. You go do your business, and we'll be responsible for the economy.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like it was this illusion of sort of opening up for the sake of the West. Even though, there were privately owned companies now, a lot of it was run by top party officials or people who were family or very closely tied to the party's elite. But it was just enough of this veneer that it drew in the West. And now we're inextricably tied to the Chinese economy, which, as you say, is completely controlled by the Chinese state.
Right.
I'm curious, James. You call it cannibal capitalism in your book. Why is that?
Well, because at the time when I wrote the book, I was kind of projecting, but the processes are all there. Cannibal capitalism is a sense where the state or the economy feeds off of itself, and how that works is so the state will dictate what happens, whether it's a new coal factory on a river, whether it's overuse and over-fertilization of farmland, or any enterprise in the economy. When the state and the party has control over it, or is able to snatch it away from the business owner once it's highly profitable, what happens? You don't create value. You allow value to flourish and to be created, and then the state comes and takes it away. And the process there is you're destroying your factors of production. You're having a tremendous amount of waste in terms of producing commodities and goods. At the time I wrote it, I think it was China factors of production were 10 times the level that it took to make the same product here in the U.S. So tremendous amounts of waste and corruption. But why is that? Well, because everyone has to be paid off. So cannibal capitalism is using certain aspects of the capitalist market, particularly outside capital, bringing capital in, creating and allowing businesses to flourish, and then sucking the life out of them and destroying that value. And the mechanism there is what's called circular financing, which is simply just, the value you take. So as a state or a party official says, hey, this is a great factory. Thank you very much. We're going to take it from you. It's too successful for you. You're getting too powerful. And we're going to see that later on as well. So they would take over that factory, suck the money out, stick it in Geneva or Hong Kong or wherever, and then they'd get a loan from the People's Bank of China and recapitalize it with borrowed money. And then the rates would be very favorable. And eventually, there'd be more value. They'd take more value out and then replace that value with another refinance. So it's a circular funding. And the banks own, the PBC is owned by the Chinese Communist Party. Chinese Communist Party has membership, 80, 100 million, whatever it is. And they have all those different aspects of how things are done. And it's very circular, right? Those 3 or 4 aspects are just very, very circular. And so you have these tremendous amounts of debt. And so those things are just, they suck the life out of it. I mean, think about how fast China grew without the state going over, lording it over them up to Tiananmen Square. That was the inflection point. And they had a period there where there was rule by committee, so that it was relatively stable and no one had too much power and so forth. And that process just kept getting worse and worse. And so, you're creating value and then you're destroying it and taking it out of the country.
So in layman terms, let me see if I understand this. It's like China's economy is built on like inflating a bubble. And then when that bubble starts to burst, you suck out all the value and put it into another bubble that then starts to grow until it starts to burst. And this process just kind of continues.
Sure. I mean, look at the recent example, which is kind of a tremendously great example, because no longer are they taking multi-million-dollar companies. Now they're taking multi-billion-dollar companies. Jack Ma, Alibaba is a perfect example of that. Too big, too profitable, too powerful, too popular. Well, those are threats. Those are 4 different threats, right? Their ability to control the market, their actual revenue, their depth of market penetration, and the ability to influence what's bought and what's sold, and the popularity of the company and Jack Ma himself, right? All those things threaten the legitimacy, the power, the prestige, and the ability of the CCP, in particular Xi Jinping, to control the economy, to maintain legitimacy, the facade of legitimacy.
I think Alibaba is also interesting because it shows how factional fighting within the Communist Party can end up screwing Western investors. Alibaba had lots of Western investors, but Jack Ma, his rise was thanks to close ties to people tied to the political faction tied to former Chinese leader Jiang Zemin. I didn't say that super smoothly. And now Xi Jinping is going after the Jiang Zemin faction, and so that means Alibaba takes a hit.
Yeah, Jiang's son was a big investor.
Yeah,
and so it's a problem. Yeah.
The infighting is there, obviously. And what does the infighting mean? It means that there's a threat to Xi Jinping's power, ultimately, right? The infighting doesn't threaten the power of the CCP as upfront and deliberately and obviously as it threatens the leadership of the CCP. And Xi Jinping has made himself the apex, primary leader of basically in every aspect of China, in the economy, politics, social, foreign policy, military strategy, all of those things. He's the guy. He's the man. So on the one hand, you have a party rife with infighting. Sure, absolutely. The party has been described by many experts and people very familiar with how it works as the mafia. It's mob. And that's probably not inaccurate. So Xi Jinping's a tough guy, no question about it. And He's going to do what he has to do to maintain that power. And whether it's internal fighting, internal party threats, or external economic / populist threats like Jack Ma. I mean, Jack Ma, was if you looked at Chinese events, he'd be up there in some kind of wig and playing electric guitar like he's a rock star. And
he had some bad karaoke.
Remember when he dressed up as Michael Jackson?
Yes.
Yeah.
So what does that tell? What does that tell the leadership of the CCP? Hey, this guy is dressing up as a Western degenerate rock star, getting with the adulation of millions, if not tens or hundreds of millions of Chinese. And what is he saying? What is a concert like that or a presentation like that in some big rally? What does that tell the party leadership? We've got to hammer this guy. We've got to knock him down because there's only one superstar in China, and Jack Ma is not it. It's Xi Jinping.
Yeah. He should have dressed up like popular Chinese singer Peng Liyuan. That's a very, very specific joke.
Yeah. So Cannibal Capitalism is basically, look, it's theft on a wholesale scale, state theft. And I know some folks who have made businesses in the U.S. and they get the business, they get the funding, they get all of that kind of stuff from all that support from the CCP here in the U.S. So it's a model that says, look, if you control the currency, you don't have to worry about its value, control its external value relative to other currencies, but you can just shovel it off in bad debt and I think it's off the shelf or in different ways, different creative accounting ways. Then you're controlling the economy without having to worry about that currency issue. You can put that off for a long time.